to our session. Today we're going to be working on somatic coaching. And I was sharing before, for people who do not know me, my name is Goldvarg, and I am the trainer of the program. And for many years, most of my work was done using only my head, only my thoughts. And then I realized that, okay, I was not paying enough attention to my body and how our body can be such a source of information and how our body can be talking to us and we may not be paying attention. And for people who are new to coaching, who are here today, coaching is about working with clients to help them to maximize their potential according to the definition of ICF. So we work with people to help them to be more effective, to accomplish their goals, to clarify what they want and get their goals accomplished. So this is what we do. And in the process, we want to develop well-being, we want to develop healthy relationships, we want to increase our communication, enhance our relationships with everybody around us. And in the process of learning how to become a coach, we have once a month an open class, like today, it's an open class where we have past graduates from the program, guests from the supervision program that I'm teaching, graduates from that program, and anybody who's interested in coaching, who would like to learn more about coaching. So welcome everyone. And we're going to jump to introduce Ronni. Ronni, we met, I was trying to remember where we met originally. I don't know, it's through ICF Los Angeles or?
Yeah, I heard you speak. Well, you may not remember me from then, but I remember you. So
what was that session? Do you remember what was the presentation I have done for the local chapter in Los Angeles, the ICF Los Angeles?
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
A long time ago, yeah. And then Ronni went through the coaching supervision program. So she's a coach supervisor. And we have been, over time, we became friends. We have been collaborating in different projects. And one of her specialties is working with somatic coaching. So you may want to talk, Ronni, to people that they're not familiar with the training.
Yeah.
It is a special training on somatic coaching. Bless you. So maybe you want to introduce yourself, share with people whatever you want people to know about you and about somatic coaching and go from there.
Sure. Okay. Let's see. My journey as a coach started with the most cerebral coach training I think one could possibly find. I don't know if it even, I'm not sure. I think it might exist. It was called, at the time it was called Results Coaching, and it became the Neuro Leadership Institute and Neuro Leadership Training. I don't want to say it was good. It was a great way to begin. And I realized that there was only really deeply cognitive. And my next part of my journey was to train with Doug Silsby. How many of you know who Doug Silsby is? Yeah. And I had the great honor of being one of Doug's students. For those who don't know, Doug passed away a couple years ago, and it was actually that experience of studying with him and observing somebody who lived his teachings in his death was really an extraordinary experience, and I felt like I had chosen wisely in choosing him as a teacher. But anyway, he was the first person who introduced me to the idea of somatics, but that program didn't go so deep. So by the time I was done with it, I had the sense that there was something important that I couldn't fully access. And I don't know how many of you have ever been in this position where you know that there's this question, where do you feel that in your body? And then you get an answer and you really don't know what to do with it. Or you get a blank stare. And I had this strong sense that there was more, like I wanted to do more to it with that, because as Damien said, I really do believe this, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the, at some point, maybe a little later, we'll have a chance to talk about some of the not theory, because I don't think it's very theoretical, but the idea that our body, we're integrated. The word soma doesn't mean, it's not a mind-body connection. The idea of somatic coaching is we are a mind-body. So we're operating out of a whole being that includes both what we consider our brain is part of our body, and the rest of our body is part of our body too. And in somatics, we work with the whole thing. The other thing that's kind of cool is, so I wanted more. Found my way eventually through a combination of courses at Coaches Rising and whatnot, finally read a book by Amanda Blake called Your Brain is Your Body. Anybody read that? It's pretty wonderful. It's called Your Brain is Your Body is Your Brain. Sorry. And I consider it the most expensive book I've ever read in my life, because about halfway through I decided to enroll in the Silsby Institute's somatic coach training, because I really wanted to dig deeper. And that's the program that I did. And it gave me that place to go, which was deeper than, you know, where do you feel that in your body? And I will say it's the hardest thing I've ever learned. And I don't think it's a great way to be, it's not the ideal place to begin one's coach training, I don't think. But it's a wonderful, wonderful set of tools and practices that you can bring in and enrich it. And that's what I think it's done for me. What did I want to say? There was one thing I wanted to say about, yeah. So that's how I ended up doing this work. And this is what I wanted to say. I think it's possible to be a really powerful somatic coach without having any conversations with your client about somatics.
Oh.
I think half of somatic coaching, or maybe 3/4 of it, is who you are. So the things I want to share today, you may choose to share these with clients. You may choose to take these practices forward. I think it's wonderful to incorporate this with clients, but I really think that the bigger part of somatic coaching is actually how you show up and being in your own body. And I really do believe that. I really believe that your presence and being embodied, and I don't think that if you're not working on your own embodiment and your own relationship to your, body mind, I don't think you can be effective with a client if you try to do somatic work. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's totally fine to take away what we do today and just take it away for yourself. That's actually completely about coaching. And hopefully these things are also things that you feel comfortable bringing forward, some of them to a client. So that's kind of more than my story, but that's the introduction I wanted to give. Any questions before I dive in about what I'm talking about, or anything you want to know, really curious about before I bring us into into practice? Okay.
So we were thinking with Ronni, instead of just having one person to be a client, to get everybody involved in an exercise. What do you think? Are you willing, everybody, to try to do a couple of exercises to get into and learning these exercises, and then we can apply them with our clients?
So what I want to do is take you through somewhere between 1 and 3 practices, depending on how long we spend with each of them. And after we do the first one, I will look for a volunteer just to have, and maybe a couple volunteers, it doesn't have to be one person, just to have a little conversation with about how the practice lands, what you take away from it. And I can show you a little bit of how I would use this with a client, but the main part is really going to be the practice. So, Damien, should I just get started? Okay, cool. So the practice we're going to begin with is the one that is the most central practice. It's the one that all other practices emanate from, and it's the one that in a certain sense is enough all by itself. And that's the practice of centering. And I'm going to take you through centering the way I learned, the way the Silsby Institute did it, and the way Doug Silsby taught me. I think it's very powerful that way. And any part of this practice can be a practice. And I'll talk about that a little later. We'll go through it maybe somewhere between a 5 to 10 minute version. I don't know, every time it comes out different. I do this in a 10-second version several times a day, and we'll talk about that. And there's, I've watched Richard Silsby teach this. He's the founder of the Silsby Institute. That makes sense. I've seen him do a 45-minute version. So there's a very wide range on this practice, and it has some basic components and a lot of variation. And the reason we center is to be open, present, and connected. there is no client I don't do this work with or don't ask to make this part of their practice. You know, one of the key principles of somatics is we are what we practice. So when we begin to practice centering, we access center. And then when we get thrown off, we have this center to come back to. And that becomes, you know, really a core piece of the coaching work, because almost every client, no matter what, is working with some version of being thrown off center and coming back to center. So we're going to do that, and I will recommend that when we step into the practice in a moment, that one of the requests I have is to try to do it not as a meditation where you close your eyes, but as a practice in which you stay in the world. Now, one way to do that is to not, if you're sick of the screen and the screen is just too much already, you can look out a window. You can do something where you're not staring directly at everybody. If it's supportive and feels good to be looking at everybody, that's also fine. But you know, you can choose. The one request would be try to do it as a practice in the world. The reason being that makes it available. You're in a meeting, you're losing center, you're in a situation, you don't have to escape to find center. You can find center in the middle of what's happening. So that's why the request to do it with your eyes open. And again, you can, you know, put your gaze wherever you want your gaze. I would also invite you, you can absolutely do it sitting down. If you're up for it, I would recommend, and I'm personally going to stand. And if I stand, I'm going to need to step back, which I hadn't totally thought of. Good that I cleaned the back of the room before. Okay. So I'm going to take us through this practice. I'm going to actually, can you hear me okay? Okay, so I'm going to do it without.
We can hear you.
Okay, so I'm going to take off the, all right. So I'd like you, so we're going to begin either seated or standing. If you're, in either case, what I'd like you to do is we begin the practice by noticing what is. This is an opportunity to drop out of your head and into the life of your body. And take a moment before we center in a variety of dimensions, which is what we're going to do. Before we do that, just notice in this moment sensation. And we're going to talk a little bit later about why noticing sensation matters so much. But notice sensation. You can feel your feet on the ground, what the sensation of that is. Any place that feels warmer or cooler. Any place where you're holding any tension and you're just like now, as you're dropping in, noticing it. This is a time where I don't think I've done this practice once in the last 6 months where I don't notice some tension, and often in places I haven't experienced it before. So just notice where you're holding tension. You don't have to do anything about it, just observe. You can notice whether that's sharp. You can know whether it's a light tension, just what the shape of it and then sensation of it is. You can notice if there's any kind of movement. Sometimes there's fluttering or buzzing or just any kind of movement inside your body. Just notice what is. From there, we're going to center in 4 dimensions. The first 3 are obvious. The fourth is a little different. So we're going to begin centering in the dimension of length. And to center in length, we're going to be in our full height. So both extending and settling. One of the ideas here is not to over effort. So be in your full length, but don't make it, extra effort to be in that length. Just the length that is fully inhabits you. You can feel space between your vertebrae. Allow your shoulders to drop into your back pockets. Really feel that extension as if you could rise into the heavens and ground into the earth. The dimension of length is, we associate that with the quality of dignity. So we're standing in our dignity or sitting in our dignity. Just notice that for another breath. And from there, we'll move into width. Allow yourself to extend side to side. You might want to just sort of move a little bit until you find balance, side to side. Allow yourself to extend side to side from your thighs to the middle, to your shoulders, extending out into the edges of your clothes and even beyond. This is where we get to take up space, and we can also create boundaries. And imagine that we were all standing not seeing each other in little Zoom squares, but actually standing in a circle in a room, and we'd be extending out towards each other. So width is the dimension of connection. So extending into what's around you, the communities, the people you care about. From there, we'll move into the third dimension, which is depth. We'll begin by noticing that we have a back body, since it's the part we don't see, and sensing that back, sensing the back of our head, our backs of our legs. And without leaning back, just knowing that we are supported. An image that you might like is the image of being supported by a dragon tail. And that dragon tail holds our history and our wisdom and our lineage and everything we bring into this moment. And we can rest in the knowledge that that's there. And then slowly allow your attention to travel from the back to the front through that middle. And the front plane is the plane of what's ahead. And just being aware that we are supported both by what's behind us as we look ahead, and finding that space right between us. If you want, you can even put one hand in front, one hand in back. Just being aware that there's that that's our depth. And inside, if we stand in the middle of that depth, we actually stand in this present moment. So just for a moment, notice all those dimensions: length, width, and depth. And bring your attention, and by the way, that's one of the beauties of somatic work, is that we have this capacity to just keep shifting our attention and using our attention in a way that no other species or creature has the capacity to do. So we do get to just shift our attention. So shift our attention to our actual center, the space just below the belly. And in that space, from this centered being, take a moment and just reflect on what is most important, what truly matters. We'll just take 2 or 3 more breaths. And what I'd invite you to do is come back to your seat and take a moment and in the chat, just jot down what your mood is in this moment. And we can all look at the moods that are here now. And if you're reading the moods, and I will say that when I do this, the purpose, I think this is hugely important. The purpose of centering is not to get relaxed and calm. Many of us feel that, and that's great, but that's not the purpose. The purpose is to be open, present, and connected. And what that sometimes means, and I find that very, very, very relevant right now, that sometimes means more aware of fear, more aware of anger, more aware of things that are under the surface. So centering is not to make everything better, it's to be present and connected. Does that make sense as a distinction? Okay, so what I'd like to do is maybe hear from somebody who would like to share a little bit about what their experience of that practice was, and any reflections they have on the practice. And it can be just in general, or a piece of it that seemed harder or easier, or was more supportive, you know, any reflection at all. Yeah, Nate.
I had a slight disconnect with the dragon tail.
Mm-hmm.
But when I thought about a small stairway or small bookcase behind me, that
worked.
That helped. So that was just something I noticed.
Okay, great. Robbie. Hi, Robbie.
Good morning or good afternoon to you. Components of my yoga practice came to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Going up, going out, being mindful, being centered, controlling of my breath. So it put me in a little yoga session.
Was it, how was it, was there any way in which it was different from what you experienced in yoga? I'm curious about that.
Nothing comes to mind, no.
Okay. Right.
No, Ronnie.
Rich, is that? Yeah.
It's like, I think you mean me. Yeah. I just suddenly realized I think I spend most of the day trying to actively ignore my body while I'm powering through, you know, the dozens of emails and Slacks and frenetically moving between all programs. And so it was, I found myself becoming more present, which was great. If I were meeting with a coach, it would be a great way to get really present into the moment. And so for me, it was a little different than yoga, because I think with yoga, I often disconnect to some degree, and this actually helped me really become very conscious in I'm here and now.
Awesome. Was there any part of the practice, Rach, that particularly was more powerful for you, less powerful?
Yeah, actually, it's kind of funny. I'm an exceedingly short person, so
how short? I'm gonna go. We're gonna see.
I'm 5. I'm just
shorter
5
than
feet.
you.
So, oh yeah, short people unite. Yeah, I'm married to another 5-foot tall partner, so we're just like little hobbits. And the tall part did not. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm lengthening up. And then when I moved side to side, I was like, I am here. I am grounding.
Okay.
I am present. And just, yeah, it got me to twist in a way that I was like, oh, wow, I forgot that I have sides to my spine.
So that might be, so here's an opportunity, like if you have time for a piece of the practice, it might just be like at times you could get a lot from going into the depth. That's what I meant earlier. You can take it apart and just every so often during the day, just feel not width, go into width, like the part that you're really like, oh, that really did it for me. So that's another way of sort
I've
of
got walls
deconstructing
literally right here, so I can just, this is a makeshift closet turned into a pandemic office, so I can just really use these walls.
So we've got a number of us here who are in the short club. I'm perfectly happy with it. Anyone else? Any other observations or reflections?
Yeah, this is so big. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh,
Okay, thanks. I was just going to say, Ronni, I enjoyed your narration so much, and the depth resonated for me in a couple ways. I was really intrigued by the dragon tail, so I had a little bit of a different reaction than some others might have, but just that comfort of the lineage, the wisdom, the kind of history supporting the future, that just felt very intriguing. I enjoyed that. So.
Yeah, and so I also want to talk a little bit about the depth piece. Depth is, because I think the depth piece as coaches might be one of the most powerful in this practice. It's what, when I start feeling pulled or into my client's story or ready to over, like that sense that I need to respond and I know it's not time, that, anybody know that experience? Just wondering. So that moving into my own depth and really feeling my back is my go-to move. Like that alone, I feel like has helped me dramatically become a better coach and a better listener and slow myself down. And for me, it's depth. For somebody else, it might be something else. For me, that move into depth, the shortcut in almost every moment where you're under some sort of stress is, what I've learned is back and down, because it moves us. When we go into stress, where do we go? Yeah. So everybody has a different stress mode, but we tend to go, there's a tending to go up. So so back and down is a hugely helpful move as a coach, as a human, obviously. And it's something we can bring our clients. It's also very easy. Like, what would happen in this conversation if you moved into your depth? You could ask a client that, and very often you'll get a different answer. So I personally, like, the depth piece has been just transformational for me. So I love that you loved that. Who else? Jerry.
Yeah, I think kind of feeding off that depth as well. I think that was the most interesting one, because I sort of felt this inner expansion, and I've just had a major life change with work and looking at that dragon, which at first I thought evil dragon, and then I thought of the Chinese culture and how powerful the dragon is, and using that as a history piece, being able to support and rely on that background as I now have to move forward in a new direction. So it was a very interesting moment for me.
Great.
Yeah, this is Jose. I have to turn my video off because I'm having sound issues. So I'm the one that wrote fearful in the chat when you asked the question, and I just want to clarify that I'm grateful. I just had a job interview and it just felt really brutal and a lot of fear came up for me. And then I'm just, this session couldn't be more timely, because I'm like, oh my God, this is exactly what I needed. And I was thrown off a little bit by the dragon image, the tail. I felt like I went into my head a little bit, thinking, oh, and I'm like, yeah, like Jerry, fear came up. I'm like, oh yeah, dragon, evil. And then I thought, well, no, based on evolution, we used to have, tails millennia ago or whatever. So I just went with it. So thank you.
And Jose, I love that you wrote fearful, because I was hoping somebody would write something that wasn't calm and relaxed, so I could make that point about it's not always calm and relaxed. Because I think that is exactly, and I know, these times we're in now, when I stop and notice my body, I don't know about you guys, but it can be like, whoa. And, you just, it's actually such a fascinating study of just whoa, and allowing myself to drop in. And we're going to talk in a moment about one of the principles of somatics, which is kind of embracing those sensations. Sensations are neither good nor bad, they're just sensation. And there's so much, we'll talk about it in a second. Let's see if anyone else has anything else to say, and then I do want to talk about this sensation idea. Tenny, not Terry.
Oh, sorry. I don't know that I have anything particularly profound to talk about it, but I thought it was just really nice to connect with my body. I think I spent some time in my head that it was just really nice to acknowledge it. I think length, I kind of liked all dimensions, and I think I'd like to explore all of them more. I think length might have been the most interesting to me, kind of a way of pulling up. And I didn't get the dragon deal either, but I'm really intrigued by dragons, so I think I want to try to figure that out again. So there may be more there. But
so I sometimes do that dragon tail, and sometimes, you know, it's interesting what's happening here, because one of my teachers was big on the dragon tail, and one said don't use metaphors. So, you know, like you can see here that it works for some people and it doesn't work for others. So our brains just work in different ways. Anyone else, before I do want to talk a little bit about sensation and somatics? Yeah, Suzanne?
Morning, thank you. Thank you, Ronni, for the talk about the dragon. During the time, I didn't image of the dragon, but I really feel really nothing. And just like sometimes raining, I watch window, do nothing. So it's something really, why I'm here, and something like really empty sometimes. So I didn't really like dragon tail or something like that.
See, it works. Otherwise, you know, you give people, I guess it's choice, right? Some things work and some things for some people and not for others. Anyone else? Anything else? So, Eric.
Yeah, I thought, you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I thought the putting a hand on the belly and a hand on the back to kind of feel the width or the breadth, that was interesting for me. I've just lost a bunch of weight, COVID, thank you. I gave it to some other people, I guess. And for me, it was helpful to be, it was helpful to be able to kind of feel the length inside the body, and then think about what was going on, because having just had a quick bite to eat before the session, but it made me really focus on that space by actually physically touching it as opposed to trying to mentally image it. So that was a really helpful thing to do.
I've led this practice many, many times. I've been led in it by many, many different teachers. And there are all kinds of nuances and variations, and it's so rich because it can, you know, every time I listen to one of the master teachers I know teach, it's like there's some new, that idea of not looking directly at the screen, which I'm loving. That's a new thing I just got. And so there's always, like, it's a deepening thing. So I do this with every client at some point, often at the beginning, and I ask them, because this is what I was asked when I first learned the practice, was to, and it's interesting. So if the instruction is practice, this was Doug's instruction many years ago, was practice 15, 20 times a day. And then you have to like shake your head and go, what does that look like? And that's where you find this brief version, which is, and we can actually do it, which is, I'm sitting, you know, not going to stand up for this. It's just one breath into length, one breath into width, one breath into depth, and one breath in center. So that's how you get a super scalable version. And that's something I do often ask clients to practice. And you know, again, the key principle of somatic work is practice. It happens in the practice. So you talk about it, you debrief it, you create the why we're doing this, but ultimately it's the practice that causes shifts. And oftentimes it's not so specific. Like the very fact of practicing that, you're changing neural paths. And the more you practice, the more you're changing those paths. And there's this, there's a study, I think it's an athletic-oriented study, so it might be, I don't know how well it ties to this, that 300 repetitions gives you some memory of it, and then 3,000 it becomes kind of a go-to. So, but what I tell my clients is, if you do 3,000 isn't so hard when you do that 1, 2, 3, 4 breath thing. They add up. So that is, yeah. So this is kind of very, very, this is the core practice, and you can see there, you can work with any part of it, you can work with the whole of it, you can, at different points, different dimensions will be more resonant. You can debrief it the way we did collectively. You can just do it at the beginning of a session. And you can do it before you coach as a way for you to get oriented and be present before you start coaching. So it's very flexible and malleable practice. So any questions about this before I move to I think we're going to do a second practice, and then I'll talk a little bit about a little more, I don't know, concept or context.
So I want to make a comment that I do believe that centering Ronni is helpful for us in our personal lives too, not only in coaching.
Yes.
Because many times we may not feel centered. And with COVID-19, what's happening politically in the United States, and we have people from all over the world. But this last weekend, for example, American colleagues here, for some of us, was very difficult to be centered. You know, what's happening. So just being aware of how things are stressing us and what a concern, just these centering practices with the body can be really helpful, they can make a difference, because by changing our body, we change the whole. It's like what Ronni was saying, not body, mind, but if we change our body in some ways, we change the whole system. So just to keep paying attention, if you're not taking advantage of somatic practices, consider different, because there are many different practices that you can do that can help us to center when we are feeling that for whatever is happening in our lives, in the world, is taking us out of our center.
Yeah. By the end of October, it's going to be 50 times a day, I think, if you're living in America. And or maybe all of November. So yeah, I mean, it's a tough, you know, every time you center, you come back to it. And I just attended kind of a class, and the comment was, we can center in our rage. Like I think that's very important. It's not about everything being okay. It's about being in a centered place as we look out at what is. And I just think that's hugely different than centering to be relaxed, to be calm. Eric?
Yeah, Ronni, I was thinking, as a matter of fact, that's where my head went as some of this exercise was going on. I have a couple of particularly difficult interactions sometimes with certain colleagues that I have at work.
Right.
And I find that a couple of them use the word rage. I'm not quite that close, but they certainly inflame me and get me pretty amped up. And this would be a really good practice, because I know things like Crucial Conversations, they talk about taking 3 really deep breaths and flooding your brain with oxygen. But this is a different way to do that. And you could do it sitting, standing, whatever. You can length, breath, the whole 9 yards. And that can really help to focus you and get you out of that flight or fight moment that you're about to go into. And for me, that would be massively helpful. So I plan to leverage your teachings here.
And that's exactly what it's about. It's about moving away from the fight, flight, freeze, dissociate response into a centered response. So that's exactly the work. Okay, I want to illustrate another principle of somatics through a practice which is, it's worked for every single person but the client I did it with an hour ago, so it's a funny moment to be teaching this. Which turned into, I want to say, the best conversation ever, when you're like the only person out of hundreds who does it. I didn't tell her that. But it's going to illustrate a different principle inside of working in the somatic domain. And so what I'd like you to do, I think, Damien, you probably know this one. I want you to make a tight fist. And what I'd like you to do now is, actually, what I forgot to say, you can hold the fist or not, but we're going to working with a challenge. And this fist right now is that challenge. And we are done with this fist. It's time to get rid of this fist. So we're going to pry this fist apart. And we're actually not going to pry this fist apart because it's not going to work. So so that's like one way we can deal with a challenge. The second thing, and I'm going to stand so you can, well, I'm going to do this up here. You do not need to do what I'm doing. What I'd like you to do is do what I'm doing, but much more relaxed and in your lap. So in this time, we're going to go to the fist and we're going to gently cradle the fist and tell it that it's been a great fist. It has done good work and we are complete with the fist. So just cradle the fist and give it that, hold it and remind it that it has done a good job and it's complete. And you can just breathe into that. And somebody say how to do that. Regina.
So interesting. Well, from a sensation perspective, my hand got warmer.
Warmer, yeah.
Yeah, so there was blood flow that started happening, and then a sense of wanting to loosen. I could feel my hand wanting to loosen.
So this is a practice that I do at the beginning of almost every coaching engagement, often in the first session. And it illustrates a couple somatic principles, but it also, to me, is a metaphor for coaching altogether, which is the way we come at issues is oftentimes to try to just tackle them, attack them. And whereas when we hold it gently, what we do, and this is a concept in the Strozzi work at least called blending, we actually give that sensation. So, you know, if Jose is feeling fear, we allow the fear and we recognize that it has value and service, and that, you know, that fist has done a good job for us. And we open up, we give it space, and we allow ourselves to sense more. And in the sensing more, there's more warmth, there's more loosening, there's, you know, it's a much more, it's a very different way to tackle things than most people. Most of us do this in our lives. We're frustrated and we go like this. And so both as a somatic, and by the way, I now have clients who, when they start getting frustrated in a meeting, they just quietly in their hands do that. They put their hand in their lap and their fist, and it's just a reminder to kind of a patience, a letting things be. And again, I think it is a wonderful metaphor for coaching in a more a broader sense. So any other things you noticed or observed or have questions about with that? And this idea of blending, to me, is very huge. It's allowing yourself to feel through as opposed to fight something. Yeah, who was speaking?
Ronni, I mean, that just made my day. That just made my last 6 months. I mean, that was just powerful. I just felt like, no, seriously, that just, you know, I just felt something exactly. I felt something in my heart and a loosening, and that it's okay. You know, a tenderness, a compassion. Yeah, that just made my day. Thank you so much.
So did you just notice that that's like how long did that practice take? Like 2 minutes? Oh, there's Jose. Hi, I get to see who's talking. Awesome. So so this is another idea. When we bring the body in, it's actually quicker. And I think that, Jose, you just really demonstrated the speed. Think of how many words and how much conversation it would take to do what that 2-minute sort of experience creates for us. And did any of you notice the more you hold it like this, I find that my body starts relaxing with it. You know, there's a sense of release, and it's not by fighting what is, it's by giving it space. And that is this idea of blending with what's happening to us instead of, you know, trying to tackle it head on. So anything else on that one? Jerry.
I'm gonna go one more time. I think I'm having a similar thing to Jose, because I just got let go from my job last week, and so that fist was all the work that I had put in to for the last 12 years, and kind of trying to figure out where to go, and it just sort of resting and saying it's all good and it's fine, and it's like, okay, here it is, let it go, and now we're ready to move forward. So it was a very
beautiful,
very very quick and simple kind of emotional release that I kind of needed, to be honest, to kind of move the next steps.
So, you know, some of the questions we're asking here are what's the fist? Like, what is it, you know, and really, you know, what is that fist for you? For each of us, that fist is something else. Now, sometimes it's a practice we bring the way I brought it. Sometimes it comes, once I introduce it at the beginning of a coaching series, it becomes a touch point, like remember the fist or do the fist. It becomes something we come back to as a reminder of not efforting our way through things, but allowing and giving space to what is. Anyone else on that one? Questions or observations? Yeah, I'm so moved by that. I'm so moved by the power of a simple practice.
Ronni, you said make a fist, and I didn't realize how tight I'd made the fist until you told me to cradle it. And then when I put it in my other hand, and when I let it, even now, my hand feels really good because I didn't have to, but you told me make a fist, and it was just like,
you just.
And so it relieved tension I didn't know was there. Thank you.
Yeah, it points that out. It really, yeah, what a great point too. It's like, whoa, when you do that, you realize how much you're holding. So look how many levels this is operating on, so how many different ways. And I want to say a practice is just a practice. The centering practice, the fist practice, any of the practices that we would do are just practices. The meaning we make of the practice is in the conversation, and it's in what happens inside of our bodies. It's not, there's no objective meaning in the fist practice. It's what we bring to it. And you can see the diversity of that here. And it's so, you know what's fun about doing this with the client? Every client's different. Today I had a client who this was the first time ever. And I don't know, maybe there was somebody here who had the same experience. She could not. It didn't matter what she did, it didn't release. That became a fascinating conversation. You know, when you breathe in and you exhale more slowly, that gets her riled up. Like we just had, so it became this amazing conversation about, at which point, Damien, I did say that therapy might be a good choice. I was starting to see that boundary, and, you know, yeah, I thought we were starting to get to a place like, whoa. But what I did was help her see that, and then her choices were to take that and go with it.
So, Ronni,
yes.
It's interesting. I'm left-handed, but my strong hand is my right hand. So I started with my right hand, and then I thought, no, I'm left-handed. Why should I do it with my right hand? So I did it with my left hand. It didn't feel comfortable, and I just let go. I said, you know, I need to do it with the hand that is.
That's so interesting. I have never, ever, ever done it with anything but my
left hand. You're left-handed too.
No, I'm right-handed.
I noticed that you're right-handed. That's interesting. But I noticed you did it with your left hand because I was looking at who was doing it with the left hand.
It feels, try to do it in the hand you didn't do it with. That's so weird.
It's different. But
I don't know what that's about. But I just don't want to.
As a child, I once punched my hand through a glass, and it was my left hand. So it's strange that I did it with my right hand.
Okay. I want to just talk a little, I'm going to take a few minutes to talk a little bit more about, I think I'm going to share a couple slides with a few different quotes on them. And I'm going to do this pretty quick. And you're going to get this, Damien, you'll get this as a handout, right, too? So I'm not going to cover everything that's in here. Actually, I don't think I'm going to put up slides. I don't feel like putting up slides. I like seeing everybody. Okay.
We have the handouts, and we can give it to people. If you want, I can share now in the chat room for everybody, or we can give it to
yeah, we can give it later. So what I want to talk a little bit about is why we, just a little bit more about somatics. And most of it we've actually, I don't think I have to say very much because you've just experienced most of what is in these quotes. But I do want to talk a little bit about what we're doing when we do somatics and this. So just Richard Strozzi, at the beginning of his book, The Art of Somatic Coaching, starts with a wonderful quote from James Joyce. And the quote is, "Mr. Duffy lived a short distance from his body." And I love that because I think, and what Richard does is he really ties that to the power and the reason. I mean, he gets very, very big with this. We do somatic work because the disconnection of most of us and our society from the body is really one of the things that gets in, like, it's a big issue. And I've come to believe this too, that our disconnection from our body is one of the things that is in the world we're looking at, and the climate issues, and in what we look at. If being more embodied allows us to take action in the world in a way that it really needs to be taken. And so I think there is a bigger purpose than just, what happens inside coaching or being connected, but it's really making a difference in the world. So I think this work is really important and not just useful, but really, really important. And our ability to live in connection with our body matters. So when we, especially when we can support a leader to be more connected to their body, I believe that they can make a bigger difference in the world. So, that's what really powers the work I do and why I think it matters. And this is, I'll read just a couple things. I really thought I did.
And Ronni, here I put the information in the chat room. The Art of Somatic Coaching for people who are interested in learning more about somatic coaching. This is a really great resource. Richard Strozzi Heckler, The Art of Somatic Coaching. I put the information in the chat room, but here you see the last two names. So I'm going to put the two names.
So I just want to read one quote from that book. So he writes that modern psychology and contemporary coaching models have taken us to a certain threshold of insight and knowing, but they have failed to teach us how to discover satisfaction and meaning as we evolve through different shapes of living, and therefore different perspectives throughout a lifetime. So one of the ideas here is our shape evolves, and becoming aware of what our shape is and how our shape is shifting is part of this work. Insight has a place, but it's a mistake to think that if we change our minds, different behaviors will follow. To simply have a good idea about something is not enough. To change how we are means changing how we act. It means functioning differently. It requires a different way of organizing how we feel, act, sense, and perceive. To embody new actions asks that we move beyond insight into the realm of practices that reshape and transform how we actually are, and not just the idea or desire of who we are. So I wanted to share that because that's really the power of practice. Practice is what changes us. And I really believe that simply adopting a practice like centering and helping our clients do that can cause such a important shift there. Yeah, Damien, I can go till about, that's perfect. If we want to take 5 minutes and do.
Yeah, like if we usually at the halfway of the session, we have a 5-minute break.
Sure.
So now it's a good time for have a 5-minute break. And when we come back, if you have 30 minutes, we may spend 20 minutes in a brief coaching demonstration if you want to do that, or you can do the third exercise, whatever you prefer to do.
Okay, so we'll take 5 minutes and then we'll spend about 20 more and then I'm gonna take off.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's everybody take 5 minutes and we'll be back. Okay, time to come back. I have another book here too that I don't know, Ronni, if you have seen this book, Embodying Authenticity. Have you seen this book?
I bought it. I think that's the one that I thought was okay.
Okay. This is Eunice Aquilina. I'm going to put the information in the chat room. And I have an interesting story. Like when I was being trained as a supervisor, my supervisor, who was Fiona Adamson, We met in London. I went to a conference, and she brought me as a present this book, because this is what I was working. I was working in incorporating more body work in my work as a practitioner, as a coach, and to bring it to supervision. So my supervisor gave me this book, and then I had the book with me. I was going to a conference in San Francisco, and I had the book with me. I was reading the book, and then I was sitting in a Fernando Flores, who is a very well-known coach, and more than a coach, he's a philosopher. And so I went to a course, and I was sitting, and next to me in the conference, I asked, "What's your name?" And she said, "Eunice." And I said, "What is your last name?" And she said, "Aquilin." And I said, "You will not believe me, but I am reading your book, and I have it in my room at the hotel. So I'm going to bring it so you can sign it for me." So would you imagine something like that to happen to you?
That's wild.
The person next to you, very, very strange. I don't know what the universe was telling me, but
I think she studied with Richard Straussy. And she also studied with, she also did the social, I think I read part of it. Yeah. I think I read it right after I read Richard's book, which might not have been the perfect timing, because once you read Richard's, like, oh. The most accessible is Amanda Blake's book, the one that I almost read it like a novel, couldn't put it down, because she tells stories, and the stories are great. Okay, I want to do, like, what is that? I think there's an NPR segment like this. I want to do a science moment and then move into one more practice. Damien asked if I'd do a demo or a practice. I think practices you can take them away, and so I'd like to just offer one more practice. Okay, so the science minute is so in the instructions for centering, even in the FIST practice, there's often, when you do somatic work, what you're asking people to do is pay attention to sensation. You're not asking them to name the emotion immediately. You're not asking them to talk about the thoughts about it, but you're asking people to drop into sensation. And I want to just give a little bit of the science of that, because it turns out that it's actually super. This is where neuroscience meets all of this. And how many of you are aware of the term interoception? Oh, good. I get to introduce you to it. It's the coolest thing in the world. I really feel like this is the superpower. So interoception is a body process. Yeah, that's it. Interoception is a body process. I'm just going to read a definition. It's the perception of sensations from inside the body. So we have an interoceptive system that is operating on automatic all the time. It is constantly reading the world and allocating resources to the different things that we need based on this. It includes the perception of physical sensations related to internal organ functions such as heartbeat, respiration, satiety, being hungry, I think that's what it means, as well as the automatic nervous system related to emotion. Much of these perceptions remain unconscious. What interoceptive awareness involves the processing of inner sensations, so they become available to conscious awareness. So it's stopping and noticing what's happening at the sensation level. It's happening whether we attend to it or not. It's happening out of our awareness. And the study of interoception is fascinating. And if you think about meditation and all these contemplative practices, most of them have us accessing interoception, didn't use that language, but part of what makes those practices work is that when interoceptive awareness is I'm reading from this piece of research, is a window to emotional experience, as well as potentially providing access to important mechanisms of emotion regulation. So simply noticing sensation is a window to emotion regulation. And that's the process of interoception. So becoming aware of that there is this thing called interoception, that there's always sensation, and stopping and simply noticing sensation. And trying to, in a sense, get below the naming of that sensation. So there's a sensation, depending on how our body's going to really, really quickly interpret or predict what that sensation means and decide whether it's fear or enthusiasm. But when we go below the label and just feel the sensation, it opens up the possibility to reinterpret it, to repredict, to rethink what that sensation actually means. And that's where the science and the practice are coming together in this work around interoception. Another book reference, okay, I'm going to tell you what the book title is, but then suggest you watch the TED Talk because the book is almost impenetrable. I got through it, and it's probably my biggest achievement of last year. How Emotions Are Made. Lisa Feldman Barrett is one of the outstanding researchers of emotion, and she does a lot there about interoception. She has at least one, maybe two TED Talks. Lisa Feldman Barrett. The TED Talks are really accessible and fun. There's also, if you can find it, and maybe I'll find the link and share it with Damien. She talks to a group of Canadian philosophy professors, and it's a really good talk, except she tells a bunch of jokes that land incredibly flat, and it's kind of fun to watch her do that. And hit the point where she goes, nobody's laughing. And this was clearly her, her repertoire of jokes, and not a single one worked. But that's a complete sidebar. But it's a really good talk, and she goes into this theory of emotion and how and interoception. Our emotions are our body making assessments of what's happening interoceptively. So when we disrupt and make it less automatic, we get more choice. And I think choice is a key word in somatics. Like by becoming more aware, we expand choice. Any questions about that before we do one final practice?
Can you say that definition again? Emotions are the body's understanding of sensations?
Yeah, I think this is in the handout that Damien's going to give you. Okay. I believe that's in this.
Thank you.
Is it in there? She says basically she writes, you're not at the mercy of emotions that arise unbidden. You're an architect of the experiences, and that's in the handout. So when we drop into the sensation, we get more choice to interpret. We disrupt the automatic process, and we create choice. And well, what does this mean for me now? How do I make sense of it? Can I just interrupt the sensation rather than going to the full story of fear and anxiety? Can I just stop and notice notice at the level of sensation? I can quiet the sensation. I can amplify that sensation. I can rename the sensation. All kinds of things happen when we learn to access interoception consciously. And that's what all these practices are about, whether you name it that or not. I thought it was fascinating to give it that name. And when you work with a client who is very cognitive, it's another way in. I've been able to get at somatics with people who won't do somatics by talking about science. It's a great little trick.
And Ronni, what you said before Nate asked you the question that somatic coaching allow you to be more at choice. This is what coaching also in general.
Yes, all coaching, absolutely. Coaching is about being a choice. Somatics is one way to access. The body is a tool inside of that. Somatics is a tool inside that. Cookie.
So if I'm not mistaken, I might be mistaken, but Boyatzis also talks about that. Moving, yeah. Having the ability to move from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic, yes. And being attentive. He actually talks about the amount of seconds it takes to realize what is going on, what the emotion is, and to be able to stop it.
Amanda Blake is his doctoral student.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's very interesting to read.
I bought his new book. I don't know if anybody's read it, Helping People Change. Damien, have you read that one?
I've read leadership books.
Yeah, he has a new book with all his research on coaching.
good for us to share the resource. Maybe we can add all of the resources in the handout.
I just wanted you to note that I said I bought the book, not I read. Not I read the book. I think people think people think I read an enormous amount, which I do, but not as much as they think. But I do buy that many books. Okay, so I want to take you through one more practice, and this one is kind of my favorite right now. It's my favorite to teach. It's my favorite to do, and I think you'll see if you agree. I like it in the midst of a pandemic, and where most of us are in smaller spaces and more distanced from our communities, our world, and so I'm finding this one very helpful in the middle of the pandemic. And again, there's many contexts in which you might bring this practice. You can bring it in the context, just so many different contexts. For me, I want to bring it in the context of our capacity to shift our states very quickly shift our states and find the state that suits us best in this moment, and know that we have these choices. So that's what and the practice is called I, we, all. And what I'd like you to do, we're going to do it now. So just make a little space for yourself. You could do the standing. I think we're going to stay seated because we are. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is find that center again. So one more opportunity to practice centering. Find your length, your width, your depth, your center. And from that, allow your body, your soma, to come to the shape of I. I, like as in me, I. I'm looking out for me. What do I want to do today? I'm taking care of me. So see what happens. Let your attention, again, that sensation piece we talked about, let your attention stay with sensation. What happens in your chest as you move into the I? What's your relationship to the floor underneath you? Where does your attention go in your body? Is it more in your head, more in your back body, more in your front? So as you really embody the shape of I. Okay. Over the next couple of breaths, let your attention and yourself widen to include the we. For now, let's say that could be everyone on this call. It could be the we you most identify with. It could be your friends, your family, an identity group. Just extend into the we. Let yourself be connected with the other people who are part of that we. And again, observe your body. What shifted? What shifted in your breath, your temperature, your mood? Okay. One more version. This is kind of intense. So go ahead and let yourself widen and expand to include the all. We could say that means every living thing on the planet, the grasses, the animals, the birds, the humans. As much as you can, let yourself notice what happens here without judgment. For some, this might be connection. For some, this might be get me out of this. Some of us may not access that. Whatever it is, it's fine. Then bring yourself back to that we. Or bring yourself back to any of those three at this point that you felt most at ease in. It's a good place when we end. I want to end in the place you're most at ease in. So find the shape that's most easeful. And just take a moment and think about how extraordinary it is that we can do with that we can actually just in words and through our body make shifts like that. I think that's amazing. And then just take a breath, kind of shake it out, and share anything that you notice. We'll take a few minutes to just debrief that. Kara.
Well, I immediately felt contractive when I was thinking about I. Everything started to pull in.
Yeah.
Solar plexus and the heart chakras just totally collapsed, if I can mention those. And we was started to sort of question, at least, but I started to breathe more. So my diaphragm started to really move, and then everything on the perimeter it started to widen as well when we got to all. So I was able to bring that back in, but it still didn't feel quite comfortable going back to I. It felt better after bringing some expansion back to it, but it's not a place where I wanted to stay. And I'm a self-proclaimed introvert, so.
Well, I don't think introvert and I is congruent. Right.
I know, but the idea of wanting to be out with being in this larger, more expansive social space.
Interesting. Okay, got it. It's not necessarily congruent with the introvert idea of self. Regina.
Well, I would also, it's funny, Kara, what you mentioned. I had a similar experience, and also as an introvert, so I find this fascinating. In sitting with the I, actually I had a pit in my stomach. I was grossly uncomfortable. And that's, I think, I've been working on, how do I set boundaries anyway, just separately with my own coach. So it's not unusual. And I felt as I entered into the we, that space felt less constricting, less confining, less suffocating. And I started to see a lot of my body start to have a better sense of relaxation and tension lessening. But what I would have said, and when moving into the all phase, that to me felt like complete calm. There was no noise, distraction. I felt like the almost like there was this muted silence of complete, I don't want to say comfort, but I was definitely in my most comfortable in the all. And definitely preferred to stay in that exercise, which I also would not have expected, in terms of my body in that experience.
Interesting. Okay.
I'm happy to go.
Sure. Elisa. Was that Elisa?
Yeah. So it is now, I typically always have problems with these types of exercises, just centering myself, and focusing, even with trying to meditate. I've always had issues. And so I found it surprising that my body's reaction to this exercise was physical. So I felt the focus in the middle of my chest, and that felt very comforting for me and warm for me. And when we got to the we, I felt it in my shoulders. And my shoulders felt broadened for whatever reason. And then for the all, I felt it in my hip, like between my hips and my knees, like I was almost carrying a weight.
Wow.
So I just found it, as I'm listening to everyone describing the feelings and you going through the exercise, I'm wondering, why am I reacting to what you're saying in a physical way? Because I really do have a ton of trouble concentrating. So I was really very surprised. I'm like, okay, why are my shoulders feeling broad, and why are my hips feeling like they're spreading right now? I don't understand. But getting back to the I was very comforting. I was easily able to just get there and feel comfortable. It was a warmness in the middle of my chest. So I don't know what that is, but that's kind of the reaction I had to the exercise.
Okay, so if we had can you see where this would become a wonderful coaching inquiry moment? Like this is, and what we're talking about is so rich, and you're doing the exploration. I have no answers here, because it's and look at everybody's experience of this is so different. I'm still finding the all a little, like, I don't know what to do with it. It's a little much for me. I'm happy in the we, and I know that at times we all need the I. So, and I want to make one comment about Wendy's asking about trauma-informed practice. That is a huge topic. David Treleaven, who was a Strozzi, oh God, another book. I'm sorry. But David also has a podcast. You can listen to his podcast. So David Treleaven works on mindfulness informed, because he did somatic teaching, he realized that if you're doing somatics, you need a little bit of knowledge about when you're potentially triggering a traumatic reaction and what to do if that happens, so that you don't, we're not trained to work with trauma, but we need to know when we see it so that we know what to do in the moment. So it's not trauma training, it's trauma sensitive. So that's exactly the right language. And his book is a really good place to start with, or listening to him. And the basic, somatic approach is to get the person who's, if you sense that you're working with someone and there's some sort of somatic traumatic reaction, to bring them back to, touch the table, be in this room now, get back into here and now, and then talk about, what their next step might be, which might not be you. But so you can see how these are openings. At least I encourage you to play with that. I think it's awesome that you access the physicality of it. I think that is super. So, yeah. So we have maybe a couple minutes left. I just want to maybe 2 or 3 ideas about how you could use any of these practices, how you might use any of them inside of coaching.
I'll just say, I think starting a session with something like this is a great idea. A lot of clients are coming, running from one meeting to the next, and, they have a lot going on, yeah. And they definitely during their day are usually not taking a lot of time to notice sensation that is happening. So I think starting a session with maybe one of the shorter versions or something like that, just to help them notice what is coming up for them, and it might help kind of inform what they want to talk about that day.
Yeah, I agree with Christy. I think that it could be a jumping off point for exploration.
Heather, you have raised your hand before. We want to talk and then we didn't hear you. Is anything that you want to add before Ronni left? Tips?
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Oh, well, I was going to share, but this is a separate question. So I agree with what Christy said. Thank you for asking, though.
And another time to bring centering in is if the client, if there's some sort of you watch, there is pressure, or there is coming back to center in the middle of a session. Sometimes I do, when there's would it be helpful to center now in the middle of a session if there's something that's, they're dealing with where they're actively getting triggered or the situation's triggering. Anything else? Any other? Christina.
I was thinking about that last one with the I, we, all, and I was very uncomfortable in the all, but I was very comfortable in the we. And I like the idea of that in coaching, the idea that you can choose, you can feel it, but then you can choose which way you want to show up. And so I would think with leaders that could be a good one with leaders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great leadership exercise. Where do you inhabit? Where do you want to be more? What's your, yeah.
So Ronni, maybe there's an opportunity when you mentioned when people are triggered during a session, or perhaps part of what they're discussing is how they get triggered in day-to-day life. Maybe helping them experience the process in a safe space with you, and then be able to carry that skill into the battlefield, let's call it that.
I think that's absolutely. Yeah. Because you're practicing. Yeah, this becomes a safe space Absolutely. So somatic practices are a way to, there's a really fabulous practice on yes, no's, and maybes, which is a great one. And it's another example of, creating a practice in the room that mimics situations outside, and that becomes the space to practice. Yeah. So
I want to say, Ronni, before you go, briefly about trauma. We don't want to go there. This is not part of the work of the coaches. So
we do want to know when we might see it.
You need to identify it. This is what Ronni said. I want to just reinforce what Ronni said, that you want to be able to identify it, and when you identify it, then explore what would be good opportunities, or what the client needs to do next in terms of looking for help. Sometimes people don't realize that they have that unresolved issues, traumatic experience that are not resolved, not complete. So therapy, counseling might be good places to go. So when you go there, don't go there. This is not, you're not trained as a coach to go into trauma, but you need to identify it and being able to refer your client. What I want to reinforce that.
Damien, what David Trelevin says, which I find really helpful, is a lot of, and this applies a little bit to coaches, like if you're centering and a person's having a strong reaction, sometimes mindfulness teachers will tell somebody who's having a reaction to meditation to go deeper. And that's wrong. Like if you notice somebody reacting strongly to something that you didn't expect, don't just keep going. That's the bottom line thing I learned from him, which is that would be a good time to stop and just back out and say, like, oh, I noticed this. What do you want to do with that? And where are you going to take that? So the thought that, you can plow through it and just feel it more, if they're starting to feel something and it's more than the space can handle, don't keep going. It's never happened to me, by the way. I attend all these sessions in case it happens. It's never happened. But that doesn't mean it won't. So, yeah. And I feel like it is a responsibility to know that.
So Ronni, thank you very much for coming and doing this session today. I really appreciate it. Let's open our microphones and let's recognize Ronni for the presentation. That was
bravo, bravissimo.
And Ronni,
thank you, Ronni.
Thank you.
To reach you, do you want to put your email in the?
Sure, and I did put it in the handout.
Okay, and you can put it now in the chat room, and I'm going to, if that's okay with Ronni, to put this in the link in my newsletter. So
Absolutely.
people who are here who are not part of the class can still access to the information through the newsletter. So everybody who is here should be receiving the newsletter. If you don't, I am going to be writing here in the chat room. I am going to put you the newsletter. I have two, one in Spanish and one in English. So for the bilingual people, you can benefit from both, and there are different activities in each one.
Hey,
so
I'm bilingual, but
yeah, soon we got to get it in Japanese, Damien. Come on, let's be inclusive. Help my bud Nate out here.
Hey. That's next.
All right, I'm gonna drop off. Thank you, everyone. This was delightful to be able to work with you. I'm so glad.
Thank you, Ronni.
Thank you very much for joining us, and for everybody who's here, thank you for coming today. For the people who came for first time, we have these sessions the last Thursday of the month, every Thursday at the same time, 4 p.m. And in the newsletter, we have the link to register. It's for free. So we hope that you can join us. And also, just one announcement, October 1st, we are having a one-day awareness on climate change. So the Coaching Climate Alliance is a group of coaches from the UK and all over the world that get together, and they have sessions all over the world, 1 hour in each part of the world. So you have access to have a conversation with people from all over the world talking about climate change and the role of coaches. In that is part of the job of us coaches working with leaders to bring awareness of climate change, how to do it, what kind of conversation to have, and how to have them. So I am going to be posting that information also in my newsletter. It's October 1st. So it's coming up. And also we are organizing a conference on October 9 and 10 on systemic coaching. So if people are interested in learning more about how to apply systemic lenses and how to look coaching from a systemic, it's part of the work we're going to be doing, the book that we're having in our program, but the authors are coming to talk to us. So if you can make it, It's a really great opportunity, and it's only $200. It's not a very expensive conference. It's very reasonable, and it can be a great opportunity for you also to meet people from other cohorts. So I am going to ask the participants of the program to stay, and everybody else, all of our guests, to leave, so we can talk for 5 minutes about logistics. So thanks all of our guests today, all of the graduates from the program.
Bye.